We've made fantastic strides in the last 10 to 15 years in collecting really detailed data on agricultural households and what households are doing on their farms and even at the level of individual plots. The LSMS ISA surveys that the World Bank and national statistical offices have been running provide just a wealth of detailed information at that level. What we've done less well, and where I think there's still an important need that remains for understanding transformation, is to understand a bit better what's happening off the farm, looking at transitions of people from agriculture to non-agriculture as they move from rural areas to urban areas. And particularly, I think it's been hard to capture what's going on in some of the rapidly changing and rapidly growing peri-urban settlements, areas outside cities where people from the countryside are moving in and setting up squatter camps. And I think one of the things we could do much better is to try to capture what's happening for those people. And in informal enterprise, in firms, both small and large, we miss a lot of what happens in informal enterprises. But by the same token, we don't do a great job yet of capturing what's happening in large commercial farms. And we haven't done particularly well understanding what's happening in the agri-dealer sector. We're not understanding very well what's happening to the input supplies in agriculture or the purchasing and marketing of agricultural commodities. We don't have many surveys of implement dealers, chemical sellers, seed sellers, and on the other hand, we don't have many good surveys of traders and markets that would let us understand what's happening to agricultural outputs as it gets sold. I think the availability of mobile phone data allows us to do things like to crowdsource information like the locations of agri-dealers. And there's been some interesting work trying to get people to send in pictures and geo-referenced pictures that let us understand where they're buying their seeds or the locations where they're selling their crops. That, I think, has the potential to let us make better sense of the prices that they're reporting. We'll know better, we'll be able to match the price they get with the place they sell and potentially with a picture of what it is that they're selling. So I think there's interesting potential to use crowdsourcing of data collection in ways that we haven't. We're starting to see, although I think it's still in its infancy, the use of remote sensing for a number of issues around agriculture and agricultural transformation. And I think there's potential here, again, to do things that would let us track better the changes that are happening in communities, not just the changes on farms, but to see what's happening in communities as electrification arrives or as rural roads get constructed, and you can begin to see a community take shape. The first restaurant that's established, or when there's electricity there, suddenly you have things that are visible in night lights data. So I think there are new sources of data that will let us understand different dimensions of transformation and allow us to move more effectively from looking in detail at the household level to looking at larger changes that are happening at the landscape level, at the community level. I think there are increasingly countries where there's an appetite for data and where governments and NGOs and donors are realizing what they can do as they have access to richer sources of data. It allows them to develop a clearer picture of the particular spatial challenges of development. I think what we find typically is that within developing countries, there are pockets that are better connected to markets, pockets of agriculture that are more commercialized, and others that are less connected and more remote. As we're developing better sources of geospatially referenced data where we can really understand from putting together different data sets where the problems are and how different things are linked in space, it allows for a more granular approach to developing spatially relevant policies. And so I think within sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, there are a number of countries. Ethiopia is one example, Ghana is another, Uganda, where governments are really interested in trying to use geospatial data to understand exactly what needs to happen in different places. And it allows for more specificity and more location specificity in the kinds of projects that they implement and the priorities that they set.